Welcome back to Not a Straight Line with me, Pete Daly-Dickson. This is the show that explores the non-linear journeys of artists and entrepreneurs to inspire you as you zigzag through your own non-straight line life. And this week, I'm joined by the multifaceted and talented Ajarae Coleman. It's not rare that we've heard of unusual and diverse career journeys on this show. It is, of course, the whole point. It is, however, rare to find a Harvard graduate in biological anthropology after an initial foray in medicine who is now an actor and coach. A true multi-hyphenate, Ajarae's got empathy to boot and a fire to seize opportunities and create the life she wants, including an imminent move from LA to London. You'll hear in this episode how she doesn't shy away from chances to grow, and her zigs and zags have created her unique offerings for her coaching clients. Ajarae really is living a great life, and I felt fortunate, because of the time zone difference, to pull her out of her morning routine and get her on Not a Straight Line. Enjoy. So as with the start of all of these episodes of Not a Straight Line, we'll just take a few seconds, just a little breathing exercise, just to regulate ourselves together, come to the same space. So we'll close our eyes and we'll do 3 physiological sighs, and then we'll get into it. So if the 3 of us just want to close our eyes and take the first breath. And again. One last time. Ajarae Coleman, welcome to Not a Straight Line.
I'm so happy to be here. And I love that you start these this way. I start my coaching calls that way, actually. And I think it makes such a huge difference. So thank you.
It does make a huge difference. The guest I had on yesterday, was the first thing he commented on. He's done a lot of Buddhism is his kind of, he's drawn to that. And he mentioned a Buddhist monk. And he said the fact that you value it enough to start the whole episode with it, thinks was just absolutely great. It was an accidental thing, actually. I had a guest right at the very beginning it was her first podcast she'd ever recorded. Never been on a podcast, and she was so nervous that she almost didn't show up.
Yeah.
And we got on and we just started talking, and I thought, I know, I'll do this. I'd heard about the physiological sigh, and it calmed her down. It calmed me down as well.
That's right. Yeah. It's good for all of us.
It is good for all of us. Anyway, this podcast is not about me. It's about you. It's your Not a Straight Line. So, yeah, love it to have you. Second time of asking. The first time last year, we had a few technical issues, but,
Yeah. Couldn't quite hear each other, which is a problem when you record a podcast.
Yeah. So just for the sake, I know where you are in the world, but just for the sake of our listener, Ajarae, just orient them where you are geographically in this beautiful world of ours.
Yeah. So I live in Los Angeles, California. I guess you could say the entertainment capital of the world as of now. I don't know how long that's going to last. But that is, I've lived in Southern California for over 20 years, and I really love it here. I'm actually thinking about spending more time in London, though, where you are. So I think that could be one of the zags that we may be talking about, is that I'll be spending more time across the pond. So I'm excited about that too.
Great. Well, we've definitely got time to explore that. But before we go there, though, we've got a diving board platform to climb up to, the top board.
Yes.
We're gonna jump into the pool of this conversation together with that initial question, which I send all my guests before the show. So when you first read that question, what zag or time in your life where there was either change of direction or pressure felt particularly high, what came to mind for you?
I immediately thought about my decision to leave my regular job and become an artist professionally, to really pursue acting full time. And that was in 2009. Up until that point, I had a trajectory that kind of just made sense. Like I kind of did the next thing that made sense given my background and my education and my interests and things like that. And I think that that was really the first time that I did something that from the outside was like, wait, what? What are you doing? Where did that come from? So yeah, it felt like jumping off a diving board actually.
That sense of doing what seemed to make sense, would you describe your life up to that point as being a relatively straight line, or were there kind of twists and turns in there as well?
Up to that point, I would say it was a relatively straight line. Yeah. As a kid, I was always very focused on school and education. I come from a family of educators and was very good at school. I went to boarding school, an independent boarding school. I went to Harvard. I did Teach for America for 2 years, which, for those of you who aren't familiar with that, I describe it as the Peace Corps for teachers in the United States, where we're placed in an under resourced school district and we teach there for 2 years and we try to make the biggest impact that we can in that time. And whether we continue in education or go off to other sectors, we are knowledgeable about the flaws of the education system and we work toward solving that issue in whatever job that we take, whatever career that we have. So I did that, which kind of made sense given my passion and interest in my family. And then I wanted to do school district management. I thought I wanted to be a superintendent of schools. And so I took a management training job at a company that offered like this rotation thing. And that's where I started taking acting classes for fun because I finally had some semblance of work-life balance. And I realized, oh my gosh, like this is actually what I want to be doing. I went back to a hobby that I had in college.
What was that the first time that you kind of started to explore that, or had that been there before?
In college, I did some plays. It was never really my focus. I didn't do any theater in high school. I did like the freshman musical, but I played sports, and you couldn't really do both. And just time wise. So in college, I had a very artistic group of friends, and I partnered with one of my best friends who's a writer, and we would write sketches and perform them in shows. And I wrote a play, but it was never really anything that it was just something that I was doing for fun and to express myself. And I never considered that it could be a career ever. But funnily enough, when I applied for Teach for America, I was placed in Los Angeles, which, I don't think there are any coincidences there. When I started taking classes, my teacher asked, have you ever considered doing this as a career? Hello, we're in Los Angeles here. You could be auditioning and I think you could be working. And I was like, huh?
So what was it? I mean, there's lots of things you can do in LA other than take acting classes. What was it that drew you to that?
Well, enjoying performing. I did love performing in college, the bit that I did. And so I just thought it would be a fun, improv classes are fun, acting classes are fun. It's fun. The reason I love to do it is because I enjoy it. And at that point, it was just like, oh, this would be a fun, like, evening class to do. And then it turned into something much, much more. Yeah.
So what was that journey like from, because there's a big gap between deciding that you're going to change direction and kind of doing that. What was it like navigating in that zag, if you like?
That's a great question. When I kind of got bitten by the professional acting bug, if you will, I would say it was maybe 2006, 2007. And I didn't actually quit my job or leave my job until 2009. So there were a couple of years in there where I was kind of getting used to the idea, taking more classes. I think I took a business of acting class because I knew nothing about how one would actually develop a career as an actor. I have nobody in my family does anything like this. I didn't have any connections. And so it really felt like a foreign thing. And so I spent a couple of years, talking to other people in my acting classes who were already doing it, exploring other types of, business of acting classes and starting to audition. I remember leaving my job, like taking long lunches and doing things like that and starting to audition for smaller student projects and, independent films and things like that I could get on my own without before I had an agent. I went to an open call for an agency. My first agent was really terrible. I would tell people who my agent was, and they would
Really?
they would cringe. They'd be like, "Oh,
But I guess you didn't know. You didn't know anything.
I had no idea. I had no idea."
Well, I'm curious though. I'm just curious though, for the sake of the listener that
Yeah.
might be at a similar stage in their career that you were in 2009. What is it that made them a bad agent, so we can know what to look out for?
Look out for that. Yeah. This was the kind of agency that would call a bunch of actors, from a casting site into an open call and just kind of take everybody, and then just kind of the throw spaghetti against the wall approach, like submit you for the lowest level auditions and just see what kind of sticks. And so they're really playing a numbers game. They're counting on having a roster of inexperienced actors. They might ask you to take headshots with a particular photographer who they're receiving kickbacks from. So I think that the red flags there are they don't really seem to care what kinds of things you're good at or what your particular attributes are. They'll sign you and send you out for random stuff. And then also if they're asking you to pay any kind of money, run. You should not be paying a representative anything until you are working and they are earning commission off of your work. So you are also earning money. So all of those things were happening. They were, asking me to do a Z card, like this modeling card, and the shoot is $300. That's it. It's really cheap. Just super scammy stuff. So it's interesting because now I feel like there's a lot more guidance for actors out there. I mean, and I'm one of the people who provides guidance for young actors, and even more experienced actors who want to get to the next level. But I don't feel like that was the case then. And I think that we were just kind of out in the Wild West figuring things out on our own, much more so than now. I'm realizing that as I look back.
We've started to explore this transition from you going down this path and you zagged, but I want to go back to a much younger Ajarae. There's a few breadcrumbs that you dropped for me, which I want to pick up. And one of them was that you went to a boarding school.
Yeah.
Is that common in America?
No, definitely not in my family. I'm the first and only person to go to boarding school in my family.
You went to boarding school in America, though. You didn't go.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
And it was about 45 minutes away from my house.
What's the story there?
Sure. So the public education system in the town where I'm from, Orange, New Jersey, was not, in my family's opinion, and just widely, it wasn't good enough for me. They knew that I was an academically gifted student and that I needed to be safe, that I needed to be challenged. My grandfather actually worked as a teacher for over 30 years in the school district, and he was very dismayed at the decline of the education system, the public education system in our town. And actually, to go back to even before boarding school, when I graduated from elementary school, from sixth grade, when I was promoted from sixth to seventh grade and would have gone to the middle school where he worked, he said, no, 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 she can't come here. It's not safe. It's not no, there's no way.
And what does safety? What does safety mean in a school environment? Do you mean like knives and stuff, or psychological safety, or both?
Yeah, fights and just like inability to maintain a classroom where students could work and learn, students who are disruptive. And, this is a town that was plagued by poverty, really decimated by drugs, a predominantly Black town. And so when my mom was growing up there, it was a very diverse town, great school system. All of the white people left the town. There's this phenomenon called white flight, which you can read about in urban centers in the United States. And crack epidemic totally impacted my town, which many people will tell you is the United States government, but that's a whole nother story, for a whole nother time. But anyway, yeah, it really impacted that town. The loss of manufacturing jobs, a whole slew of systemic issues. And I was one of the students who was impacted by that. And luckily, my family had the resources and the wherewithal and were resourceful enough to find another solution for me. But that's not the case for most of those kids,
Do you have any siblings?
Interesting. I'll tell you that later. So I have a younger sister. Is my only sibling. So I was the first person to like encounter having to go to middle school. So I actually went to kind of a family boarding school situation. I went to live with my aunt and uncle who lived in Montgomery County, Maryland, which was a wealthy school district. They didn't have any kids. They're like, we're paying taxes here. We don't have any kids. You come live with us and go to the public schools here. And so I did that for 2 years. And then after that, I applied to boarding school for high school, for secondary school, and went to boarding school. My sister ended up going to live with an aunt in North Carolina for middle school. And then she chose to go to Orange High. She chose to stay in our town to go to high school. So she had a different path than I did.
Boarding schools are definitely a thing in England. I think you're the first person I've ever spoken to that's gone to a boarding school in America, which is why I asked the question that I did. And
Yeah.
and there's plenty of both research and anecdotal evidence of the trauma that is enacted at boarding school, but from the separation from parents, as well as the stuff that goes on in same sex. Was it a same? Was it a co-ed?
Mine was co-ed.
It was co-ed. Yeah. So maybe it's slightly different there. What are your memories of boarding school?
I absolutely adored my experience at boarding school. I loved my school. I still love my school. I go back to all our reunions. I actually just got back from a wedding of one of my best friends from boarding school. We have a very tight-knit group of friends. And so my experience was very different than a lot that I hear. I also think, though, that there are a very specific set of circumstances that led to that. So to back up just a bit, my family is, middle class, regular family who could not afford the tuition at this boarding school. I think at the time that I went, it cost something like $40,000 a year for a boarding student to go there.
Wow.
And when I was in 8th grade, the year before I was to apply for boarding school, I remember sitting and eating dinner and watching the news with my grandparents. And there was a story on the news about this philanthropist who had donated $100 million to his high school, a boarding school in central New Jersey. And we're like, oh, it's in New Jersey. And I remember my grandfather saying, oh, maybe you could go there. And then they said what the tuition was. And we were like, that's not happening. But it turns out, Peter, that Walter Annenberg, he was a media mogul. He was actually the ambassador to England, the U.S. ambassador to England for a while. He donated that money specifically for students to be able to go there who couldn't afford to go there. And so they all of a sudden had this huge endowment and they could offer need-based financial aid to students. And that completely changed the makeup of the school. They were able to accept such a diversity of applicants, And so academically gifted students from all backgrounds all of a sudden could go to the school. And so I entered as one of Annenberg's kids, and there were actually other students of color there. There were other students who were not super wealthy there. There were a lot of international students there. It was a really thoughtfully curated class of students, and it was amazing.
It's at some level, the zag that you chose to jump into the conversation with when you sort of zagged, you were going down a career path and then you zagged to be an artist. But it seems to me that this opportunity to go to a boarding school potentially be even more influential in terms of the total trajectory of your life than that zag when you were older. Just being immersed in that environment.
I could agree with that. I think that it was hugely influential. I think it felt like more of a straight line to me because there was no question of whether this was a good thing for me to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, except that if that endowment hadn't been there, you wouldn't have been able. Your parents might not have wanted you to go to high school where you were, but you would not have had a choice, presumably.
Yeah, presumably. I mean, there were other schools that offered scholarships and things. I applied to a scholarship program called A Better Chance, and so there were a lot of different independent schools that I was looking at. And again, I was really good at school, so I would have gotten in somewhere. I think that this was, and my school is called Petty. Olaviva, for all the Petty listeners. I think that Petty was a very special place and the perfect place for me at the time, but it didn't, in the grand trajectory of my life, it didn't feel like a zag at the moment.
Yeah,
That
no, I get that. I get that. And what is good at school mean? Just like everything, or were you drawn to particular subjects? I know you've already mentioned sport.
Yeah, I was pretty good academically all around. I really loved math and sciences, but it just came pretty naturally to me. I loved to read as a kid. Like I was that kid who my mom would have to be like, "Go outside and play. Like stop reading." Super nerdy. So
That is just so the exact opposite to me. I can't tell you.
really, it's funny.
It is so interesting to talking to so many people. Their time at school is so influential. Last week, I had the actor who's currently playing Jean Valjean in the West End in London.
Oh, awesome.
So obviously, right at the top of his career, and he spoke about a teacher in secondary school who saw something in him that no teacher had ever seen something more in him than he had seen in himself, and that sent him on that path. Did you have any teachers that, on reflection, particularly influential in your life?
Oh, absolutely. Whew, where do I begin? Wow, I'm like almost getting emotional thinking about my teachers. I had my fourth grade teacher. This is like going back to 9 years old, Mrs. Brodsby's. She was just so, I don't know how I would describe it. She attended my high school graduation. She actually taught me fourth and fifth grade. She told me that she moved to teach fifth grade because she wanted to teach me again.
Wow.
My sixth grade teacher had such an amazing emphasis on Black history. I feel like I really developed this pride in my heritage with her. Miss Knight, she also came to my high school graduation. I think about Mr. Hartle, my band teacher in seventh grade and eighth grade, who was so patient with me. I didn't realize how bad I was at the flute until I got to an actual band. and, and he was like, just so incredibly patient and really helped me work my way up from last chair to second chair. And then in high school, there were just there were several. There were several in my boarding school. And then, I mean, it was a teacher, Wendy Phillips, an acting teacher, who really encouraged me to consider doing what I love to do instead of what made sense as a profession, you know? So I always think about her.
What do you think she saw in you?
I think that it's a good question. I think that even before I had a lot of training as an actor, because I'm a facile reader, I was a really good like cold reader and I can absorb material pretty quickly and make decisions about it. And I think that goes back to my reading ability and, really understanding a script quickly, loving to reading plays. And, so I think she was just kind of like, who is this person who's doing this for fun, but like actually kind of really good at it? Just kind of this natural talent. Yeah, and I think she probably saw how much I lit up when I was doing it, you know?
Do you remember how you felt when she first asked you?
Honestly, I think I felt a little bit confused. I was like, "What?" I remember kind of wondering, like, what are you talking about exactly? Like, isn't this just something that people do for fun?" But she was an actor. She is an actor. She and her husband's a director as well. I remember looking at her career and thinking, "Oh, I see. I see all these shows that she's been on, and I see, because she's a working actor. She's not a famous person. I didn't recognize her when I walked into the classroom, but she was a successful working actor." And I think that really, I think as a non-actor, you can start to think, "Oh, actor, Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, like these people." But there's this whole world of actors out there who have very successful careers that we don't necessarily know. And I think that she opened my eyes to that.
So we've looped back to where we started, and we'll come back to there again. But I want to go back to another breadcrumb that you dropped for me earlier on when you said that you went to Harvard. That's obviously an academically elite organization. What did you study there and why?
I loved science. Biology was my favorite subject in high school. Oh, that's another teacher, Mr. Oram in biology. He wrote the textbook, which I thought was just so cool. So yeah, I loved bio. And I thought that because I really loved biology, that I should be a doctor. Isn't that what people do? And so when I went to Harvard, I started on a pre-med track, majoring in biology. We call it concentrating. It's very pretentious.
Was Harvard always, when you were at high school, was Harvard the one that you wanted to go to? Was there a sense of expectation? Your parents were educators. Was the standard set that high for you?
No. My family was very open to what I wanted to do. I considered going to a historically Black college. My mother, my uncle, and a cousin went to Hampton University, which is an HBCU. Yeah, I visited Georgetown. I liked Georgetown. I liked, there were a couple of schools, but actually an advisor one of my mentors in high school said, Harvard's the best. Like, you should go to Harvard. And I actually only applied to Harvard, hilariously enough, because I did not enjoy college applications. I was just like, oh, this is so tedious.
So you just did one? I
just did one, but I did early. And I asked my college advisor if I could see, I'm just realizing how confident I was as a high schooler. It's like, if I don't get in, I'll have a couple of weeks to submit applications to my other schools. Is that okay? And he was like, yes, Ajarae, it's okay. I guess he was pretty confident too. And then I got in. So I only had to do one application. Yeah. It's pretty funny when I think about it now. But so I concentrated in biology. I started doing this biology track and realized I did not want to be a doctor, like at all. And I was talking to my advisor about it. I was like, yeah, I really love bio, but I realized I don't want to be a doctor. Like, I don't even like changing my own Band-Aid, like this is not what I want to do. And she said, well, have you ever considered anthropology? Because there was an anthropology track at school called biological anthropology, where it's kind of a mix of the harder sciences and evolutionary biology and things like that. But there's also a more kind of holistic. And it's kind of interesting, Peter, because I feel like it really meshes well with my curiosity about humans and human cultures and the human condition as an actor.
Yeah, totally get that.
So I feel like this is like the perfect solution to what I wanted to focus on in college. So I did. I studied biological anthropology. There was a non-thesis honors track, which also appealed to me because I didn't really want to write a thesis, although I wanted to do an honors track. I learned about the great apes and how similar like our DNA is to the great apes and the cultures of humans who still live in kind of the way that we evolved as humans, hunter-gatherers, and learned about the biology of aggression. I wrote a big paper on that. And Jane Goodall is like my favorite person. I got to read about, her studies. And Richard Wrangham was one of my professors. He's a big anthropology guy. And yeah, it was just, I didn't know what the heck I was going to do with it, if anything, after. But my advisor had really great advice. She said, you're here, you're getting a liberal arts education to learn how to read critically, learn how to write, learn how to think. It really doesn't matter whether you want to be an anthropologist or not, whether you want to research in Uganda or not. If this is stimulating to you, this is what you should do. And it was, and I loved it.
What you just mentioned there, those are transferable skills in anything.
That's right.
As you were coming to the end of that course of study, though, presumably you are thinking about, okay, I'm now going out into the world and adults have to earn money and pay the bills and whatever. Wouldn't life be great if we didn't have to worry about that?
Yeah.
So what was starting to kind of float around your mind about how you might earn money and careers and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I really, even coming to the end of my college career, I was like, I'm not sure what I want to do. And now I realize it's because I wanted to be an actor. Right. But I didn't know. But I knew that, especially given my trajectory in my education, I really cared about the education system in the US. And one of my jobs in college actually was to help recruit for Teach for America on campus. I had an internship doing that. And so I would coordinate info sessions for Teach for America. And we would invite recent, Teach for America alumni to come and speak on campus about their experience and talk to college seniors about whether they wanted to do the program. And I always joke that I recruited myself because, in listening to this, I realized that this is something I wanted to do. And so I did that. So not only could I have an impact for students who didn't have the resourceful family that I had, who were stuck in school systems like the hometown where I came from. Not only could I do that, but I could also have a couple of years to figure out what I wanted to do after that. And so that's what I did. And I was placed in Los Angeles. I moved to Long Beach, California, and taught in Compton. Knew nothing about Compton other than what I hear in the lyrics of rap music that I loved. And yeah, it was a really fulfilling experience. I really loved it. It was hard as hell. I was exhausted at the end of every week. I was like, yeah, it was really hard, but really rewarding.
What was hard about it?
I was working and teaching students who were far below grade level. And really, it's the mission of Teach for America, or it was at that time, and I think it still is, to make significant gains in students' ability during the time that we're there. So we're not just looking to like move them up a grade level. Because our students are behind, we've got to move them up 2 grade levels, 3 grade levels, right? And so we are like really going for it, working after school with kids, working with parents, having parent meetings every week. It's a really intense 2 years as a teacher. I don't actually think it's sustainable for a long career, but because I didn't know that I was going to be there for longer than 2 years, I just really went full bore for 2 years.
So it's both the hours, the amount of time, and the kind of work you're doing. So it's emotionally exhausting, I suspect.
That's right. Oh my gosh, yes.
What's your fondest memory of that time?
I remember receiving a gift from one of my students. Her name was Jeanette. She had drawn a heart. She did it in watercolor too. She found paint somewhere and like painted this heart and said, and I still have this actually. It's not up on my wall, but I have it because I'll put it up in my office at some point. You're my favorite teacher, and I just knew how much you cared about me. Thank you. So just receiving that kind of feedback directly from students was amazing. And also seeing my students progress, seeing them come in as scared 6th graders. I taught 6th grade at a school that was 6th, 7th, and 8th. So my kids were the young kids. And I was also teaching predominantly English language learners. So kids who were coming from Mexico very recently. And we weren't at the time, I don't know if California has changed this policy now, but we weren't allowed to teach bilingually at that moment in time. So I wasn't supposed to teach in Spanish, but there was no way I couldn't speak some Spanish to these kids because they did not speak English yet. So yeah, to see their progression in just a year, so much more confident, so much more comfortable at school. It was a really special time.
You were there, Miss Knight.
Hopefully for some of them.
I'm sure you were. What I've heard about, I only know the name Compton from what I've heard from, popular culture. What was it like living there?
I was actually pleasantly surprised at how nice Compton was. We have this image of gang violence and, I don't know. I just had this image from listening to rap and watching movies. And it's sunny Southern California. It was so much different than, say, the lower income housing in New Jersey, where there were more like projects, like really high rise buildings. I was driving down the streets of like single family houses with palm trees lining the streets and, people having front yards and backyards. And to me, coming from a town in New Jersey that was very poor, to me, it was nice. It was really nice. But that's also, it's all relative, right?
So you came to the end of your time there in Teach for America. You obviously hadn't been dissuaded from being involved in education because you said earlier on in our conversation that you thought you'd be a superintendent of a school. That's not actually, I'm not familiar with that role in the UK education system. What does that actually mean?
There are teachers in a school. The leader of a school is called the principal. And in a school district, which is a collection of schools, elementary, middle, and high schools, that is led by a superintendent. So it's kind of analogous to like the CEO of a whole school district. Los Angeles Unified School District is, I think, the 2nd largest school district in the country. I think New York might be the biggest. And so it's a huge organization that you're running.
So you were setting your sights pretty high then.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I should say now it's just easier to say I wanted to be superintendent. I wanted to do school district management of some kind. I didn't know where in the organization I would land, but I wanted to do that. I didn't want to be in the classroom. I wanted to have an impact on a larger number of students. Actually, one of my best friends, who was my roommate when I did Teach for America, hey Ramona, she has the job now that I could have seen myself doing. She runs several charter schools, and so she kind of manages principals and does that kind of thing. She's not a superintendent, but like has a that kind of job. And I thought it would be helpful to learn about management from an organization that was actually well managed, which is why I took this job at this company called McMaster Car Supply Company. It was an industrial supplies distributor, but the key was that they had a management kind of training rotation program where you could learn how to manage different aspects of the business.
And that was the point where you started taking acting classes because you, as you said, you got some semblance of work-life balance back.
That's right. I was like, oh, this is what it's like to actually have a job where you're not working 24 hours a day.
This is what it's like to have a life. Oh, right. Okay. Now I know.
Yeah. That's right. Yep.
So we've kind of circled back to the ZAG that we started the conversation with. And I want to jump to where you are now. So that was like 2009, you said you stopped your job. So what year did you get your first professional acting gig?
I think I did Days of Our Lives in 2007. Is that right? Maybe not.
Is there a working actor in America that hasn't done Days of Our Lives?
No, it's impossible. It's impossible.
There are equivalent shows. I remember Days of Our Lives. It's not shown here, but I was brought up in Hong Kong, and we had Days of Our Lives in Hong Kong. There are equivalent shows in the UK
that have just been on for 60 years. And yeah, no, maybe actually that was 2009. When I left McMaster, I had booked a play, and I realized because I had done a film a couple of months before, and my manager was starting to get a little frustrated because I requested vacation at the last minute to do this film. And she was like, Ajarae, you can't just take a week off with no notice. And so I started to realize, okay, I'm going to have to make a decision here.
Did they know what you were doing?
Yeah. My director manager knew. She knew that I was like kind of thinking about pursuing acting. I remember showing her my headshots when I got my first like real good headshots. And, she was really sweet and supportive, but as long as it wasn't affecting my work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I realized that this was not a job that I could have and do both. I mean, I know there are many actors who have full-time jobs and it works because of the way the job is or whatever, but this was not the case there. And so I started to create an exit strategy and plan to leave when I, vested in my retirement program. And then I booked a play, and it worked out because rehearsals would be starting after I vested. And so I was like, okay, I'm pulling the trigger. Let's do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just go back to, you said you planned an exit strategy. That's an exit strategy from McMaster.
Mm-hmm.
And what did that look like? What options were you exploring?
Yeah, I mean, nothing. I was just, at the time I was married. So luckily I didn't have to worry about like immediate earning money immediately. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't giving up my deferred profit sharing retirement program. And so I feel like that was the biggest factor that I had to think about. And then once I left, I joined Central Casting. We're doing that because I wanted to join the union. And, I had found out that I needed to get some like 3 background vouchers to do that. I was immediately on the set of Iron Man 2 after that. So crazy to think about that time. But yeah.
I guess the reason I kind of picked up on that exit strategy and read more into that than there was, but isn't that the sort of primary existential issue for people who know that they are creative, they have the heart of an artist and they want the life of an artist, but they are trapped in some degree in the 9 to 5, a job because they have bills, they have family, they have responsibilities. It's like you said, you pulled the trigger. You were in a relationship where you had another income coming in, which kind of created a bit of a safety net for you. In your current work with actors at various stages, I'm guessing that this comes up quite a bit. And I'm in danger of getting emotional here because it's a situation that I found myself in as well, and kind of still do to some extent. I know, like, you cut me anywhere. I mean, after this conversation, I've got a hot foot it to the theatre. I'm in a production of Medea at the moment in Leamington. And you just cut me anywhere you want to. I'm an artist. I'm an actor.
Yes.
And the older I've got, the more I've realised how good I am as well. And I'm proud to say that. Previously, the British kind of
modesty, humility. I get you. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But this it seems that
Well,
the
I think,
whole
Peter,
of
what we were talking about earlier. No, I don't mean to cut you off, but
no, please do.
that whole process of all the research that I was doing about the business of acting, right? I feel like my exit strategy in a way was happening from 2007 to 2009, right? After my teacher said, Ajarae, what's happening here? And I realized, oh, interesting, right? For me, it was like a mindset shift, a learning about how I actually get work. Like, oh yeah, there are casting sites that I can put my picture on and start to go to auditions. It was learning about that there was a union, how I would potentially join it. So I should say I knew all this stuff before I actually quit my job, right? Like I could see a path for myself where I was actually earning money as an actor. And I did, I already had a play. I wasn't earning a ton of money at this non-union gig, non-equity gig, but I was earning some money there. I was doing background work, so I did have like some sort of idea of how to make this transition. Like I said, I also had this buffer. So I knew I didn't have to like meet all of my financial needs right away, but I also was looking for part-time jobs. I started shortly after that to tutor the ACT and SAT, the college entrance exams in the US. With my academic background, that was a perfect job for me. I started working as an interviewer at my acting school not too long after that. So, I started accumulating these other jobs. And after working with my marketing coach for a while, I had the idea for my coaching business, or what turned into my coaching business. And so I started working on that pretty immediately. So
hang on a second. You're working with a marketing coach for what reason?
She was like a business of acting coach.
Okay.
Marketing in that sense, how to market yourself as an actor.
And in that experience, do you think that's something that I could do?
No, not at all. I did not want to be a coach at all, Peter. This talk about a zag. No. So the way my business started is I was on a call with her, and she would host these group telecalls where we'd all call into the same number. And, this is like super old technology. And she would coach us, just audio only. Now we do it via Zoom, but I was coaching with her and talking about how I wanted to do more casting director workshops. Oh no, I wasn't being coached. I was listening to another woman being coached, another actress. And she was talking about doing more casting director workshops. And she was asking the coach, well, how do I find the people that I want to meet? How do I find the person who's casting Grey's Anatomy? How do I find the person who's casting Criminal Minds? My coach was like, oh, well, you can, just kind of Google them and look around and sign up for a bunch of studios and kind of pay attention to their calendars. And she was like, it would be nice if there was a place that had all this information. Somebody should do that. And I was like, oh my God, I should do that. Like, this is a great business idea, to have a website where actors could just type in the name of a casting director and see all the places where they were teaching classes. Because at that time, there were 35 to 40 studios in Los Angeles that were hosting casting director workshops. There were maybe 15 to 20 in New York that were hosting casting director workshops. And I thought, Peter, as I was listening on this call, I was like, everyone on this call is going to do this. This is like such an obvious idea. And so I had a fire under my butt to actually do it quickly before someone else did. And that became Workshop Guru. That's where that's where my business came from.
And where was this in the timeline?
This was 2011.
Okay, so fairly soon after you left.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Was that set up to create a revenue stream for you, or was that something that you were doing to help your fellow actors?
Well, both. It was really to help myself because I was doing these workshops too. But yeah, it was a revenue stream. It was a subscription model, actually. And so for $10 a month, you could have access to this full database, including not only a schedule, but reviews of these casting directors. Because there were so many studios, when all the information was aggregated, prices started coming down because they had to compete now, right? It was easier to see, oh, I can meet Jamie Castro for $220 at Act Now, but I can meet her for just $40 at Actors Key. Huh. So it really helped all of us. It's like all of a sudden there's visibility on the market.
Is it still going, or is the environment kind of negated the need for it?
Yeah, the environment changed a lot. So I'm forgetting what year this was, but there was this big crackdown on casting director workshops in Los Angeles. The city attorney really went after them. There was this casting director who was very anti workshops. He felt that they were exploitative and they were pay to play and actors shouldn't have to do this. The problem with that was that there's not a lot of opportunity for actors to meet casting directors if they're not already auditioning for them, especially with the online casting model that we have now. Casting directors don't have time to call people in for general meetings and things like that, So for young actors who aren't represented, particularly, this was a really great resource. But anyway, there was this big crackdown. And so a lot of studios closed. And so there are only maybe 3. So the service is not as needed. At that time, I pivoted to include all acting classes, not just casting director workshops, and also reviews of agencies and management companies. And kind of throughout that process, I started a YouTube channel to kind of teach actors how to use the site, how to make good use of the information, which is really how my coaching career developed. I did not set out to be a business of acting coach, nor did I have the knowledge earlier to do it. Something that's grown and developed as I have developed my career. I can teach others kind of how I've done it and how I've seen others do it.
One of the things that I love doing in these conversations is providing my guests a way of reflecting that happens naturally from exploring the not a straight line journey, but also weaving that non-straight line journey into who they are and where they are right now and why they are so freaking good at what they do. So it's kind of almost a way of naturally and organically displaying their value, how they help people. And with some guests, we've kind of gone into a bit of a role play. For example, I'm a new client coming to you. What does it feel like? So I'm not saying we necessarily go there, but I want to go back to this kind of the existential crisis of I'm an artist, but I'm trapped in a job and I want to get out. How would you go about coaching someone through that whole kind of process? Where would you start with them?
I would first talk to them about, really impress upon them that they are an artist, even in their current vocation, right? Like that there is no set kind of like daily activities that make someone an artist. You are an artist because of your inclinations, because of what your interests are, because of your curiosity, because of your desire to express yourself. And so really just implanting that belief, I think, is important. I think that that's what my teacher helped me to do. And then beyond that, it's just figuring out the practicality, like the practical considerations of giving yourself more time to explore those interests fully, right? And to collaborate with the people that you want to be collaborating with and all that kind of stuff. So for me, and this is the same advice that I would give someone who wanted to start a business, right? Who had a full-time job and wanted to start like some sort of business. I actually don't think it's wise for most of us to quit and go cold turkey into the other thing. I think a more gradual approach makes more sense for most of us. I have a lot of clients who have retired from their jobs. And so they did have more of a clean break, but they have their retirement income and they have, but for most of us, that's not the case. We're still in a position where we have to do our job or, earn money somehow, or we're parents and you can't just stop parenting your kid, you have things to do. And so I think there's the information gathering phase. And a lot of people find me because they're already in the middle of that phase. They've landed on my YouTube channel. They're on my email list and they're already absorbing information in that way. And then there's like the shifting focal point phase. And this happened to me, to use my example at McMaster Car. All of a sudden, I wasn't focused on becoming the branch manager at McMaster Car. I was putting that work, I was doing my work, I was doing it well, but I put it on more of kind of an autopilot for myself, realizing that that was not my end goal in life. My goal is to figure out a way to transition into this other career, right? So putting things more on autopilot, right? Like doing a good job, but not going above and beyond in that other job.
If not the bare minimum, then not much more than that.
Not much more than that, right? Right. Like fulfilling your responsibilities for sure. Like I'm not one to shirk any of that, but really putting it in its place because so many of us are actually going above and beyond just because that's what we do and not being very thoughtful about it. Right. So giving yourself that space.
And that there is a sense of worth that is gained from, working hard and,
Yes.
going above and beyond. And I guess it's kind of not only shifting the focal point, but shifting where you get your worth from as well.
That's right. Yes. Yep. Exactly. I think that after that, it's just a matter of really paying attention to the opportunities that emerge, right? Really staying open. There's a success path for actors who join my community at the table. And the first stage of the success path is ownership. And I think that that is really the key here, starting to set goals for their career, starting to get a daily practice to connect inward, whether that's meditation or breathing exercises or whatever that is, right? Getting accountability structures in place. One of the things I did early in my career that so served me is I had an accountability partner that I talked to every morning at 7 a.m. We would share kind of like our 3 most important tasks for the day related to our careers, even though we had other things going on, and really hold each other accountable to those things, right? Like starting to get support, developing a target list, and then starting to think about an income source that, is flexible and allows for the time that you need to explore your creativity. So that's where I would start.
That daily accountability, well, I'm not surprised that you've achieved what you've achieved if that was there right at the very beginning. How did you enforce isn't the right word. Well, I heard the saying that accountability without consequence is just something, I don't know. How did that accountability work? Because that sounds like the kind of thing, certainly for my artistic career, that sounds like something that I both should and would like to have in place.
Yeah. So you're going to laugh. So basically and my partner's name is Anthony. We would give each other a little bit of slack. So if we say we're going to do something and we don't do it for a couple of days, it's okay. But like on day 3, if it's not still done, we would say, okay, well, this has been on your list for a few days. If you don't do it by tomorrow, you have to pay me $20.
Okay.
We just put money on the table, right?
Okay.
And then it's like, okay, well, I don't want to pay you $20. So I'll do it. I think each of us had to pay the other maybe a couple times over the course of like 9 years. We were partners for a very long time. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing and it's inspiring as well, because that word, accountability and accountability partners, fuck, I mean, if you hear it, if I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. But you're the first person that I've ever spoken to, I know categorically, has had that kind of accountable relationship in their life for that amount of time. Well, it begs the question, why did you stop?
Yeah.
Because you got so freaking successful you didn't need it, or what?
I think that the idea of completing my daily task didn't feel like it was filled with so much resistance. And, I'm thinking now, I have an accountability partner, a partner that I co-work with once a week, and we kind of do more of a weekly thing, so I still have that structure in place. And I have a coach that I meat every 2 weeks that I have that structure in place. So it's still there. It's just not as frequent. My partner also kind of went off to focus on something else. So we had had a dinner. We celebrated the fact that we were ending the thing. It was a specific decision that we both came to. Just kind of came to its natural end. Yeah.
And that sounds really healthy, rather than kind of just drifting, like going for two days without doing it, and then 3 days, and then before you know it. So it's really sounds like a really healthy end to it. I'm curious. I mean, obviously, the kind of things you were doing would have changed quite significantly over those 9 years. What's those kind of snapshot? The kind of things that you were like front of mind for you in terms of the three most important things to get done at the beginning of those 9 years as opposed to the end of the 9 years,
Hmm.
just so we can kind of get an idea about that journey?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure that it was so different. I think that we talk a lot in my community about the concept of power moves versus paper pushing activities. And I define a power move as something that usually involves interacting with another person, but really like sharing your work with the world or creating a connection or nurturing a connection. Whereas like paper pushing activities is like the stuff that we have to do, like updating our casting profiles, uploading my reel to my website, changing my, research, admin, that kind of stuff. And so,
Safe.
yeah,
Safe.
the safe stuff that I can do behind my computer keyboard. Yeah. I think that the focus for both of us was how can we really challenge each other to do the power moves, to really do those things. So it would be like, okay, I have to send these postcards. And maybe the difference is that earlier there was like a much more of an emphasis on mail. People were in offices and really we were doing a lot like via mail. And toward the end, it was like a lot more electronically, like sending email newsletters, writing emails, connecting with people on social media, that kind of thing. It's like how the connecting has evolved, the modes of connecting.
I guess another way of expressing power move is, and I've heard the phrase, something that moves the needle, something that makes the boat go faster.
That's right. Yeah, for me, it's like you're going to impinge upon another human being with this action in some way. Either, you're publishing something to be, enjoyed by an audience, or you're connecting with an individual, or you're doing something that's going to impact another person with your communication, with your essence, with your art.
I love that. So what is I'm sure there's no average day for you, but a kind of an aggregated day in the life of Ajarae look like?
Well, I always start with my morning routine. It's very precious to me. I try not to do anything really before 10 a.m. You're one of my London friends, so we're doing this before 10 a.m., but this is not usual.
And what sort of things do you incorporate and have you experimented with in the past for your morning routine?
Yeah. So I always start with a cup of warm lemon water, tongue scraping, lemon water, a Vedic meditation. So I do Vedic or transcendental meditation 20 minutes twice a day. So I do that in the morning. Right now I'm leading a program called the 40-Day Abundance Adventure for actors. And so I'm doing that alongside them. So that's a journaling process and a meditation. Sometimes I'll pull a card for guidance throughout the day. Sometimes I'll do a little bit of reading if I have a little bit more time in my morning, but that's generally the morning.
Very still, very quiet,
Yeah,
reflective.
very, very reflective, still and quiet. Yep. Yep. There's definitely no technology. I don't check my phone. I don't check my email. I don't check social media until like 10. Then I love to work out if I can. So I try to find a class. I belong to a gym that has some great group fitness classes because I thrive in the group class environment. So I'll go do that or do some yoga. And then my day starts. On days that I am leading coaching calls, I like to do those around 10 or 11 or 12, sort of early in the 10 to 12, or excuse me, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. is like my good work time. So I try to do my deep work, my coaching, like that kind of stuff during that time. And then the 2 to 4 p.m. period is like emails, admin, that kind of stuff. I try to wrap up by 5 with my late afternoon, evening meditation, and then kind of transition to my evening, cooking dinner, seeing friends, that kind of thing.
And where does acting fit in this?
So so for instance, yesterday I had an in-person audition at 10:30.
Wow, what's one of those?
I know, right? So almost all of my commercial auditions nowadays are in person. My film and TV is self-tapes and yeah. So yesterday I had audition and then I had a rehearsal because I'm in a scene study workshop on Saturdays. So that was my work for the day, right? I didn't do any coaching stuff yesterday. And there are many days like that. I try to keep my business stuff, coaching business stuff to Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays only so that I have Mondays, Fridays is my creative day. That's sacred. I don't do any meetings on that day. It's all about working on whatever play I'm working on, reading, acting, working on. I just produced a short film like that a lot of that work was happening that day. So I do use time blocking because I really like having the spaciousness of a bunch, several hours of time to focus in and drop into my creative stuff versus an hour here, an hour there. Like that doesn't really work for me as well. But yeah, in my we talk about scope of focus, right? Like my acting career is my priority. So all other things get moved around that.
Do you have goals for your acting career?
I do. Yes, of course.
That's the right answer.
Who would I be without having goals? Yeah, the main goal that I'm working on right now is to book a series lead on a single camera comedy of some sort, like a Schitt's Creek, Modern Family. I also really love sitcoms. I've done a lot of sitcoms, like co-stars and guest stars on sitcoms. So all of my kind of like focused visualization. So actually, a part of my morning routine that I didn't include is before I even get up out of bed, I listen to my voice narrating, arriving to set, going into the studio, having the costume designer show me my outfit for the day. Like there's this whole visualization that I do each morning around the show that's coming my way. So that's also part of the morning routine, I suppose.
But one of the things I find interesting there is I've heard it said that having goals like that are great, but what's arguably more important is setting, because there's some part of that is out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
You don't produce the show, whatever. But what you are in control of is the stuff that you do, that you're in control of your behaviors. So what are the behaviors that will lead you to that series lead in a single camera comedy? What are you doing specifically?
The people who are on my target list, right? Like the people who I invite an industry professional in to talk to the table every month, for example. The people who I have on my radar are people who are creating those kinds of shows. The work that I choose to do in my workshop, right now I'm working on this play called Five Women Wearing the Same Dress. And it's totally the scene that I'm doing, it's a dark comedy, like one that I'd want to do, right? So like continuing to develop that muscle in myself and my craft. The content that I create on social media, all of it, because that is what I want to be doing. That's kind of the big kind of project that I want to be doing. That guides all of my daily actions. So what we do is we create a marketing plan, it's called. The paper pushing activities and the power moves on my marketing plan are all related to that goal, right? So I have a target list and then, there are other kind of side things that I'm doing. Like as I've mentioned, love reading, but I'm not narrating audiobooks. Like, why not? So I learned to narrate audiobooks late last year, and I have a booth, and I'm starting to reach out to publishers and things like that. So, this show, I also feel like, and this is, maybe some people would disagree with this, but I feel like taking the kind of mindset, like really focusing on like the quantum with this particular goal and doing my emotional freedom technique and meditations and visualizations and all that kind of stuff related to that, and then going about my life, I feel like is actually the way that I'm manifesting it. Like I've seen it, in other things as well.
Yeah.
So
No, that makes a lot of sense to me.
yeah,
This is the way.
it's the way. It's the way. Like really enjoying myself, feeling fulfilled, and just following the breadcrumbs. I have a target list now of casting directors in London. I met with WME before I left in January. They're going to introduce me to some agencies there that they work with because they don't have a talent department at WME London. Just like staying open.
Yeah.
And really keeping my vibration high. Yeah.
That's the thing. You mentioned breadcrumbs and England there in the same thing, and I was going to refer to that breadcrumb that you dropped for me right at the very beginning of the conversation. So tell us about that. Tell me and the listener about that potential move, or kind of, what's that about? Spending more time over here?
Yeah, expansion. I'm thinking of it as an expansion. I have some dear friends who've lived in London for a very long time, ever since college. You met one of them at our table event.
I've met them.
Pasha.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I have always felt kind of a connection to Europe in a weird way. I don't know. I've never had a desire to live in like New York, but when I went to London, I was kind of like, huh, this is really, I go off of energy a lot. It's
Mhm.
just, I don't have a whole lot of logical words to say about it, but I just felt really good in the energy of the place. And particularly when I organized that meetup and just had a chance to actually meet some of the people who live there, including yourself, I was like, oh, these are my people. And I just want to have the opportunity to be there more. In talking to some of my American clients who have moved there recently, they have been kind of shocked to realize that there is so much opportunity for people with American accents to work as actors there. And so that really piqued my interest. And I said, huh, well, this is interesting. And I'm going through a bit of a life transition, having recently broken an engagement here in Los Angeles. And so I'm in the process of moving and, figuring out what my next place to live is and all that kind of stuff. And I just really love the idea of spending maybe even up to half the year or more in London. Just for some reason, that just feels really good. So I met with an agent in December and, like I said, another one in January. And the agent I met with in December was like, oh, I'd love to work with you. Like, let's do that. So there've just been like a whole lot of green lights. And from my work with Vedic meditation, we call it following your charm, just like following the path of least resistance and following what feels good and what feels like happiness to you. And for me at this moment, London feels that way. And so I am looking at finding a flat there. And yeah, I'm excited.
Well, I fully endorse that decision and that charm.
Thank you.
I don't actually live in London. It's a
Right. I
common.
remember.
Americans talk about England and it's London, but I know that you
Yeah.
don't. You know that I don't.
That's so true. Well, also, I don't live in Los Angeles either, but I call it LA. We kind of generalize around the major city.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, what's the timescales for that potentially? I mean, if you're looking for somewhere to live, it's obviously fairly serious.
Yeah, it's pretty imminent. I mean, I'm not sure. Like I have to sell my house here and figure out what's going on with all that and all that kind of stuff. So I imagine it'll be back and forth for quite a bit. I also really ideally, Peter, want to have a place in both places. I have a thriving community here. I have representatives here. I love working here as well, and that's why I'm considering an expansion because I'm thinking, well, why can't I live in both places?
Yeah.
Hmm,
Well, I know in America there's a whole thing about bi-coastal. You've got representation in the West Coast and
that's
East
right.
Coast. Well, why not want to be bi-country?
That's right. That's what I want.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
You mentioned the breakup of an engagement. I imagine that's pretty hard for you.
Yeah. The hardest thing ever. Really, really hard. Yeah.
So you mentioned previously that you had been married.
It's been a while. I've been engaged for a while too, since 2020. So yeah, I've had a lot of long relationships and it's weird to be single again, like especially at my age and wanting to have a family and things like that. So that's been quite an emotional journey over the last year or so. But I'm feeling really at a really positive place right now. I'm feeling really, I would say, clear in my decision making. Even though it's hard, I think it's the right thing, or I know it's the right thing.
I think the very fact that you do spend so much time. A friend of mine has got a saying, inward and upward. We talk about onward, onward and upward. He goes inward and upward. And I think the fact that you do spend so much time looking in, not from a navel gazing perspective, that's where it happens. Like everything out there is only a reflection, really, of what's going on inside. So uh, that inner work. I mean, you've not used the phrase, and we've not talked about mindset per se, but everything that you've talked about, right from when you only filled out one fucking application for college, like that's what what does that say to you about your mindset, even then at that age? And that's something that's obviously, continued to grow and expand, that mindset piece.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny that you say that because I think I remember, and so in late 2012, I was selected to do one of the network showcases here, the ABC Diversity Showcase, it's called. But it's basically like 12 actors are chosen out of like, I don't know, over 7,000 to be presented to the industry by this network as like, these are actors that we want to work with and blah, blah, blah. And I really thought that I was going to be on my show in 2013. I was like, "Ah, I've got this showcase, like this is happening, blah, blah, blah." And now looking back at that, I realize that that would have been a total disaster if I hadn't booked a series lead at that time, just in terms of my emotional development and maturity, my ability to manage money, just in so many different ways. And so, I will say that this journey as an actor has been the first time that I haven't had what I wanted immediately when I wanted it. And that's been a really great thing for my development as a human being.
It's been an absolute joy to spend a little bit of time with you on your evidently non-straight line journey. Is there any part of your non-straight line life that you want to share that we've not had an opportunity to?
I think I just want to share that my friendships, romantic partnerships, friendships, and community have been so key for me in this journey. And even as I'm in the moment right now where I'm, going through a transition in terms of loss of a person who I thought was going to be my life partner, I really look and see how much of an impact that person has had on my life in such a positive way. And I just want to, like I have friends who I've had since I was in 8th grade, right? And, I think that one of the great privileges of my life has been to stay in touch with and create this web of people around the world. And I think that that has been such an amazing help to me as I've gone through these different stages of my journey, just to have that as the consistency, just to know that I'm anchored by this global community of people who know who I am and what I'm about, and that I know who they are, and that I'm willing to do anything for them and they're willing to do anything for me, and I think that as an artist, that's so important. And something that I talk about a lot with my clients and coaching clients, community members, that because we as artists are in such a collaborative business, what we do is like the epitome of collaboration, in whatever medium that you work as an actor or as a filmmaker, as whatever, that developing that skill is really important. And like leaning into that is really important and enjoying it, just not feeling that you need to even create relationships with a need to get anything from it, but just like noticing when you are magnetically attracted to someone and just like going for that, just riding the wave of it.
Like a bit like when I got that email from you. I've been on your email list for I don't know how long, and getting that email where you said that you were coming to London. I'm pretty sure that I would have had. It was relatively short notice, I think.
It was such short notice. Oh my God, I didn't think anyone was going to show up.
So there's almost definitely stuff in my calendar that I had to move around, but I just knew that I knew that I was going to be in that room.
Love that.
Because you've got you where you sense that there is that kind of energetic, vibrational, if not match isn't necessarily the right word, but connection
Yes.
is it.
Yeah.
Connection, community, curiosity, all great words begin with C, I think.
Totally.
Coleman.
We'll take it. Yeah.
Ajarae, thank you so much for being with me and the listener for this time. Question that I do ask all my guests at the end is how the listener and I can help you the most right now.
I'm going to say another C word. I'm going to say connect. I would love to hear from you and actually connect with you. I think the easiest way to do that would be to follow me on Instagram. That's the social media platform that I use the most. And, tell me who you are and what you do in the world and how I can help. I would just love to connect with as many people as possible who are part of this extended community of listeners. Yeah.
Wonderful. the other question that I ask is an opportunity for you to give a gift to someone. So with the evolution of this podcast, you're actually my 52nd conversation for this podcast, and
Wow.
I can't quite believe that that's happened. Like,
Amazing.
you start something and you just keep going. You put one foot in front of the other, and before you know it, you've had that many. That there are now two ways for people to not necessarily come on the podcast, but two ways for people to have this conversational experience and to create the space to reflect and go through that kind of bit of introspection and maybe join the dots of parts of life which haven't been joined before. I don't know if that's true for you. So people can come on the podcast and they can book, or people can pay a little bit of money and jump the queue, and there's more availability, and they can also choose to have the conversation and it not go on the podcast. So there's just more scope to kind of flex into that.
Yeah.
So basically, all that to say, so it costs £200 to jump the queue. Who would you like to give that gift to that you think would really value the experience that you've had?
Oh, I love that question. I would love to give it to my accountability partner, Elise. She is an actor and a coach and a phenomenal human being. And I think she would really love this journey. And I think you two will have a great connection as well.
I'll follow up with you.
Okay.
Off. Well, I'm going to say follow up with you offline, but it's still online. But it's away.
Off
Away.
recording.
You know what I mean? Off recording. Yeah. Off recording. Yeah. So, Ajarae, it just remains for me to say on behalf of this from myself, thank you so much for being with us and for being open and vulnerable and for sharing with us.
Thank you, Peter. My pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Not a Straight Line. If this conversation helped to reorient your internal compass or inspired you in any way, please let us know by heading to podcast.notastraightline.life/rate and leave a rating and review. Thanks, as always, to Matthew Bliss of MB Podcast Services for his exquisite engineering of this episode. If you'd like him to help you with your podcast, contact details are in the show notes. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, or there's someone whose non-straight line journey you'd just love to hear, then please visit podcast.notastraightline.life/guest. Thanks for being here with me, and I'll see you next week for another amazing, deep, inspiring non-straight line journey. Love you.